Yes.
Dr. Glaze, first of all, let me say thank you so much for that riveting presentation earlier today at the Professional Development Conference, the national conference that we hosted this year. And I'm so happy that you were able to actually be with us.
Thank you.
And, you know, thank you for your gift of the book, one of your books that you've written. I think, you know, for me it was amazing just to, having spoken previously to your speech, hearing some of the themes that you reiterated basically at an international level to kind of just validate what we're trying to do here locally and the focus that we have here locally. That was very heartening, you know, for me as minister to reinforce the fact that I think we're on the right direction and we're kind of in the right course.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to say, you know, thank you for making the opportunity to come to the Cayman Islands and to impart your experience and your knowledge.
And Minister, thank you for your leadership. I love the Cayman Islands. And when I heard you speak this morning, I was filled with emotion because you said so many things that are very important. And for the international comparability, I thought that was very, very good. Your statement was visionary. And the ideas that you put forward, as I said, you could have been talking in many parts of the world. So even though you're here, yet you're so interconnected in terms of vision and ideas. And I thank you for that. And I was so pleased with the people I've spoken to. I think you've been doing a lot. Sometimes systems don't take time just to see how much they've already done because you're not satisfied with where you are and you want to be better. But you have spent good resources on professional learning, which to me, or professional development as some people call it, but it is the key to improvement. And you are focusing on the right areas. So I felt very good about it because in so many places that I visit, you may hear a direction that you think, oh, that won't work. It has not been proven to be important in improving system or student improvement. But your speech was research informed and very progressive. So let me thank you for that. And I'm just looking forward to implementation and sustainability.
Well, and I mean, thank you for that endorsement because, I mean, I, as minister and the team that supports me in the ministry, including the counselor in the ministry, we really take a lot of time and effort to try to have an evidence-based approach and trying to develop strategies that are proven. And we are moving, and as I said in my deliberations or my speech today, we have made great strides, but now it's about taking it to the next level.
Absolutely.
And taking it to the next level requires bringing in the aspect of international comparability and the focus on raising standards to make sure that we have a system that enables our people to compete globally, even if they never leave our shores.
Absolutely.
Because of the economy in the Cayman Islands, that's a reality as it stands today. You don't have to go abroad to be competing with people from multiple nationalities.
Exactly.
So we are really the microcosm of the global village, so to speak, here in the Cayman Islands. So we need to have students that are able to compete globally. So having that focus on international comparability, international competitiveness, and raising standards was an area that, as minister and this government, we brought the value addedness, so to speak. As I said, and as I've said since taking office, my role as minister is not to change for change's sake. But what it is to look and to identify where we are now, what's working. Let's strengthen and support and promote that. But where we have those gaps, where we have those areas that we haven't given sufficient attention to, or we know that is an emerging issue that hasn't actually caught the attention of previous administrations, it is our responsibility to try to identify those issues and put strategies in place. And so that's the approach that I've taken as Minister responsible for education. We've had a national strategic plan for education in 2012 to 2017, which was adopted in early January 2013, right before the new government took office. What is typical and what is often a casualty, I think, of changing elections is that previous initiatives that have started by other ministers under other government administrations are often shelved because the new minister or the new administration wants to put their stamp on it.
That's exactly.
And as I've said from then, it doesn't make sense to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Wonderful.
And it's building on those building blocks. So I've committed to the implementation of that plan.
That's wonderful.
But in looking at that plan, I recognize, and that's where the key priority strategic areas of focus that I talked about,
Yes.
the technical and vocational education and training, developing a comprehensive strategy
Yes.
that talks about getting our students engaged from the primary level straight through the tertiary level for those people that have the aptitude, that have the ability, the skill set, the desire, that may not have seen that as a real pathway
Exactly.
to employability or a pathway to being a meaningful and productive citizen. That's obviously an area where I thought there wasn't enough emphasis on.
That's good.
And that's an emphasis that I've brought to the table, and the government is supportive in terms of developing that kind of strategy.
That's very good.
Another area was the issue of gender mainstreaming, and I thought, and as you reiterated, it's the same concern that I had upon taking office, and as Minister responsible for gender affairs, wearing the multiple hats here now as well. The issue with respect to education, and this was just my gut feeling.
Yes.
So hearing it from you,
That's
who
right.
obviously, your extensive experience, hearing it from you that, the concern today is not so much about women's performance at the education level, but it's our young men.
Absolutely.
And that's the same approach, that's the same concern that I've articulated from the gender perspective to my team as well. And I've charged them with looking and conducting research locally, trying to analyze whatever data we have to see where the trends are from a gender-based perspective, to see if we need targeted strategies for the different sexes.
Yes.
And so, this conference, we obviously have somebody from the University of West Indies and the Gender Studies Institute as well.
That's right.
Who's going to be facilitating a workshop that deals specifically with kind of mainstreaming the issues of gender in education.
That's right.
And, there are a number of other focus areas that I spoke about as well in the conference. And it just, that's where we feel that we really need to
move in that direction.
To move in that direction.
Exactly. And I was delighted to hear you speak about the whole issue of career development, technological, because that's what most systems in the world are doing right now. So you talked about the areas that were so topical. I mentioned this morning that one of the statements that stayed with me as a young guidance counselor was the importance of seeing the relationship between learning and earning, especially for children who are at risk of dropping out of school. They're the types of kids who say, "Miss, this is boring. Why am I doing this?" So when a good teacher can say, "These are the skills, this is what you're learning, and this is how you will transfer them into a career," then they say, now I see how I would use those skills. So that's very important for young people to see that relationship.
Absolutely, and it was what I thought was so interesting, and it just really made that point so clear, is when you gave your own personal example about the student.
Yes.
And so obviously another focus area, and the main focus of this conference, is the issue of inclusion.
Absolutely.
And looking at students with special education needs and disabilities in particular. And that again is another focus area that I thought there was not enough emphasis in the system currently when I did the initial analysis upon taking office.
Yes.
And so there is a specific targeted area of focus that the ministry is now charged with developing strategies to address.
That's right.
And that's why the theme of this year's conference is really about teaching, or helping to teach our educators how to address the concerns of all of our students at whatever level that they're at.
That's exactly.
And your example about the young man that you just couldn't get through to until you figured out what made him tick.
Exactly.
What was he was interested in, and being, I think it was mechanics.
That's exactly. And connecting it.
And connecting it. So making algebra relevant to
exactly.
changing a carburetor or whatever.
That's exactly
or whatever. And I think that's very much what we are, attempting to achieve, and looking at the way that the curriculum is delivered as well.
Right. Because we believe, as Michael Fullen said, we should be having 100% success in our schools. Not all children are going to learn in the same way and are going to get it at the same time. I found when I was a teacher that there were fast learners, and I was one of those, and they were slow learners. The slow learners will achieve the objectives, but not on the same day and at the same rate. Some of those kids need after-school programs. They need Saturday programs in order to achieve the critical objectives. But what we must do in education is to make sure that there's a body of knowledge that is going to be accessible for all students. So it's as if here is what all students should know. Here is something that's nice to know. You know, so if they're finished, they move on to this, and other things that are absolutely desirable for children. But at least the critical objectives should be mastered by all students. And I think that's what we should aim at.
And again, the synergies between our two perspectives and philosophies was just so striking in that, you know, that I completely 100% endorse that philosophy. 100% of our students, we should be looking for 100% achievement in the sense that every child can succeed. The question is, are we able to tap in to that, their ability and their potential and draw that out? And I mean, absolutely, I think so there has been, you know, and the focus and the steer has been really about this sense of urgency that you talked about as well.
Minister.
I mean, and it's not because of based on the 4-year political cycle, because I've recognized, and I think the country recognizes that education is a process.
That's right.
It doesn't happen in 4-year cycles.
That's right.
And you need to have that kind of political maturity to say, okay, what if something has happened previous to this new administration taking office, continue it, support it. But where you know that there's areas that haven't been addressed, then jump in and
you know,
do it.
that's why Finland is so successful. Just as you said, governments come and governments go, but the educational vision remains. And you are saying very much a similar thing, which really warms my heart, because education is more than a political party. It's the future of a country.
Absolutely.
So the government should not necessarily throw out what has gone on, and you are building upon that. And I think that's political maturity.
Well,
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's because ultimately it's our children that will suffer, and it's the sustainability of the country in the long run if we don't have this focus that whatever we do, it needs to be child first, our children first perspective, and recognizing that, you know, what happened even previous to the previous administration, the outgoing Chief Education Officer, Mrs. Waller, talked about the National Consensus on Education, which took place about 10 years ago. So that really was the foundation and the building blocks, I think, for the changes that we have seen.
That's very good.
But where we're at now, and one of the things that you know, this administration and myself as minister and the ministry are looking at very critically is the whole kind of governance model of education, and whether or not what we have now is still relevant, is the best for our system.
We have been through that in Ontario, really looking critically at what governance structures, policies are best for our times.
Exactly.
I was also delighted to hear you talk about gender issues. One of my concerns, as I mentioned at the conference, is the issue of boys, because it has become a global issue. Girls are outperforming boys all over the world. And we were concerned about that in the 70s when the girls were not doing as well. Now because of the programs and so on, the girls are doing very well. My question is, who is championing, and I think you are, the whole issue of the boys and how they do in the system as well? Because many are lost. They don't have the role models, they say, because you see the women in the 70s targeted girls and women's issues. We don't have males targeting men's and boys' issues. So the boys, the young boys, are wondering in some cases, who do they look up to? I made the statement, which I picked up when I worked in New Zealand, engage me or enrage me. And they say that's what some of our young boys are saying to us. Provide engagement, which is something you talked about. How will the school better engage the boys? How will the schools use strategies that are important to boys? We cannot expect boys and girls to learn exactly the same way, because we know they're different. In many systems, the elementary system is probably predominantly female. How can we get more young men in elementary or primary schools so that the boys will have role models? So that is something we have to target. As I said, affirmative action, that term that people hated, helped women in the 70s. Now, are we going to hire affirmatively for young men to go to primary schools? Where are we going to find them? Because the young boys need the role models.
I mean, I think you're spot on, because in many instances, there isn't the role model in the home.
Exactly.
And so because they spend the majority of their daylight hours at school, that's really where that role model can be offered if it's available. And I think, that, and again, wearing the Minister of Gender Affairs hat, but again, not just trying to compartmentalize the issue of gender. It is something that I'm trying to permeate all of the areas, the subject matters within the ministry, but not just the ministry, within the government as a whole. And that's something that I'm trying to champion. And I have to say that I do have the support of the government, of which I sit with as well. But it is exactly that. I said my kind of armchair philosophy, and it was really heartening to hear the kind of validation that you brought, that the focus with respect to gender as it relates to education in the compulsory age needs to be focused on what's happening with our young boys. And that has definitely been the directive that I've given to the Ministry and Department of Education Services, to try to figure out what really pertains, what exists. Do some analysis, do some gender disaggregated analysis of the achievements, of the issues, then figure out how we can develop strategies to address where the needs are. And one of the areas, again, that I felt was lacking from the National Strategic Plan perspective was a sufficient focus on conflict resolution and crime prevention.
That is so important.
And I mean, you made the connection too between
character development.
And character development, absolutely. And how if we don't educate our people,
that's right,
then you will see crime escalating. There is a direct correlation between that. And so by not just providing education in a vacuum, but one that is relevant, one that teaches those skills, how to resolve conflict in a way that is acceptable. Because let's face it, we will always have conflict, even in the workplace.
But how do you resolve them?
But how do you resolve them?
The big thing is, when I meet with teachers, I say, let's start at the biggest level. What kind of country do we want? Then what type of communities? Then what type of schools and classrooms? And build on that. Once teachers can see that the work that they do in schools every day touches the future of the country, it's amazing how motivating that could be. You're not just teaching math and literacy and so on. You're building a country here. And you're doing that, you're modeling democracy every day in the classroom. As I said to them, what an opportunity, what a challenge, but what an opportunity.
And I think that what was really appropriate about the national conference that was just held today, or that's taking place now, is that the theme, engage, connect, and learn. And as I said, and as I think you reiterated as well, that's what we expect to see in our class. We expect our students to be engaged with the material. We expect them to be able to make connections between the types of information that's taught in maths as relates to science and everything else, but also ultimately to learn and to develop themselves. But in order to facilitate that, it was important, as you recognize, that we need to invest in professional development of our teachers and our educators. And another program that is just so exciting for me to be able to continue to talk about, because we just launched it this academic year, it was the development and in collaboration with the Ontario Principals Council, the International Leadership Certificate Program, which is going to be rolled out over a number of years. It was developed specifically for us here in the Cayman Islands, and again, so we own the intellectual property. It's something that we will continue to use for years to come. And hopefully, if there's a change of administration, I hope that same focus will continue. I hope to be here for quite some time, but certainly as long as I'm involved in the process of education and continuing in the process of evolution from our education system, we will continue to focus on professional development, especially at the leadership level. Because, I'm from the old school, as young as I may think I am, but I'm very much about, what happens at the school level. The principal, the leadership is very much should be at the helm and really sets the foundation for everything that happens at that school.
You know, Minister, the literature says if you want to do two things to improve education systems, focus on instructional effectiveness and leadership development, which is what you're saying. How do we get our teachers to be better teachers? How do we get our principals and all the leaders to be better leaders? And if we do at least those two things, we can continue to grow the system, and that's what they need. They're learners. Your people are inveterate learners.
Yes.
They want to learn, and as long as we're feeding their curiosity and building their skills, then you will see continuous improvement.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, the fact that, and we as a government and in the ministry, we're committed to this idea of ensuring there is continuity with professional development, and is in the fact that we have actually adopted a professional development policy this year, which makes it mandatory to actually participate in the professional development. Now, this is something that that as minister, I wouldn't expect that I would see anybody, kicking and dragging and screaming, because as you said, as a teacher, you should inherently be committed to that learning and the concept of lifelong learning, because we expect you to be able to connect and engage with children today who don't need you to be able to necessarily tell them the information.
They learn it ahead of us sometimes.
They learn it ahead of us.
But we need to teach them the values.
The values.
That's so important. With all that's on the internet, how can we, and you mentioned this, Minister, create critical skills so that they can make decisions around the content that is so omnipresent today.
Right.
That's wonderful.
So it's a different way of, I guess, and I'm certainly, not a trained teacher, but I do have teachers in my family.
You talk as if you're a teacher.
Well, I've got a lot of experience with people who are in the education perspective, and I spent a lot of time personally in the education system throughout the course of my own life and career. So I've been the benefit of experience in education, and I've had some phenomenal teachers who, to this day, has made an impact on, or have made an impact on my personal growth. I've had some not so great teachers
and you learn from them as well.
Exactly, who also had an impact in not the most positive way, but that's why I have such an appreciation for the importance and the value of the teacher and the role of the teacher. And as I said, it cannot be underscored enough.
That's right.
The investment in our teacher is basically an investment in our future.
They would be delighted to hear that. And they know, I think, that's how you feel about them. But let me say, with all that you have said, the focus on professional development, learning, your support for teachers and principals, I feel very optimistic about the future of education in the Cayman Islands. And I thank you for that.
Well, I thank you, and I hope, we will continue to be able to dialogue, and I actually look forward to
visiting Ontario.
Visiting
our schools as well.
That's right, and thank you very much for that offer, because I think, I personally trained in Canada and schooled in Canada when I did an MBA in law in Ontario. So I do have some familiarity with the system. Yes. But, and just as I said, just looking at, the league table, not just the league tables, but the McKinsey report.
Exactly.
And talking about the systems, the school systems around the world that have taken it themselves from, good, better, best to great. Ontario is right up there. Is definitely one up there, and I think it's important that we not just focus on and develop, which I spoke very strong about the succession planning and building capacity locally, and the conference was another, I think, a very significant milestone in celebrating our local expertise, because all the workshops are facilitated by local persons in our system. So we have a lot of best practice happening right here in the country, but the opportunity to share that amongst their colleagues aren't as prevalent as I think it could be. And so when we have conferences such as this, the primary focus is often on making sure that we develop that best practice exchange and building connections between the teachers themselves. Because as you said in your presentation, it's not about keeping my classroom closed to the world because I don't want anybody to see that I'm maybe struggling in this area. It's about opening it up to say, you know what, I may be good at teaching math, not as good at teaching English, but the person next door is. So how can we collaborate and learn from one another and improve our skills as a whole? And by doing that, we're we're improving the prospects of our children.
That's right.
Because that classroom instruction, as you said, is so critical to the outcomes of our kids.
I look forward to improvement here.
Yeah,
I'm going to see it. I know that.
Well, I have to say I'm excited. I mean, we have seen changes in a very short period of time.
That's
I mean,
right.
since just taking office, and I think having that passion and having that commitment and having that drive and making that really emanate throughout the ministry, the department, and then the schools.
And supporting your teachers.
Correct.
Teachers do not do well when people beat up on them. I've seen that in other countries. Yeah. They want to do well, and they want leaders like yourself, which is your orientation, is going to find out what professional development they need, provide it so they can be better. And that's how we build motivation and commitment.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think my personal mantra in the ministry, and I think it's been adopted as the ministry's mantra now, is no excuses, just solutions.
That's good.
And I think that's really, I mean, I expect, high standards of myself. I expect high standards of the staff. I expect high standards of the educators. But where the areas, again, the gaps, where we've recognized that they need that support.
Yes.
Because we are going to move to a system where there is greater accountability,
exactly,
where there is greater responsibility put at the school level.
Yes.
Because again, I think we need to get to that where the school is a reflection of the community, and the community takes responsibility for the school, and the leadership at that school is going to be critical in all of that. And then building the partnerships with the private sector. Yeah. We've got some great initiatives that I spoke about, the learning literacy, level literacy interventions, and the maths recovery that are supported by private sector partners currently. And the plan is to develop more of these types of partnerships in the education system. But we need to, so that's where the evaluation of the model comes in.
Exactly.
But also, as you said, it's not in a punitive way.
Or shame and blame.
Correct. It's about identifying where the gaps are. And one of the gaps that have already been identified was this leadership capacity building at the leadership level, and we've moved right away to fill that. So I'm excited. I'm excited as well, and I'm so excited about meeting you.
Thank you.
I've heard a lot about you from my professional development manager in the ministry, and so it's been.
Well, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.